right now, somewhere in the world, someone is opening Canva. In fact, more than 200 million people use it every single month. It's in 190 countries. It generates over $1 billion a year in revenue. It's used by 85% of Fortune 500 companies, and it's valued at over $40 billion, making its founder the wealthiest self-made woman in Australian history. Her name is Melanie Perkins. She built one of the most successful tech companies on the planet, and 100 investors told her it would never work. But here's where things get interesting. The investors weren't the hardest part. The investors were easy compared to what came before, because this story doesn't start in Silicon Valley or a Stanford dorm room. It starts in a living room in Perth, Australia, with a 19-year-old trying to teach graphic design to students who kept wanting to quit. Perth, 2006. About as far from Silicon Valley as you can get on this planet. The nearest major city is Adelaide, over 2,700 kilometers away. The tech scene basically didn't exist, and Melanie Perkins was a university student studying communications and commerce, picking up extra money by teaching graphic design to her classmates. And every single week, the same thing happened. She'd watch students open Photoshop or InDesign, industry standard software that professional designers used, and within minutes, their faces would change. Confusion, frustration. Some of them were paying thousands of dollars for these programs. Most would spend an entire semester just learning where the buttons were. Not doing anything creative, just trying to figure out how the software worked. Melanie kept thinking, this is insane. Design should not feel like this. She was 19 years old. She had no money, no investors, no technical background, no industry connections. What she did have was a boyfriend named Cliff Obrecht, a very patient mother, and an idea she could not get out of her head. So they started small. If you wanted to make graphic design simple, you didn't start by taking on Adobe. You started somewhere manageable, somewhere specific. They chose school yearbooks. They built an online platform called Fusion Books, a drag-and-drop yearbook design tool that lets students create professional-looking layouts without any design experience. No months of tutorials, no expensive software licenses. You opened it, picked a template, and started designing. The office was Melanie's mother's living room, and it worked. Schools started using it. It spread by word of mouth. Fusion Books became one of the largest yearbook companies in Australia. They were making money. The concept was proven. Design could be simple. Anyone could do it. But Melanie's real idea was something far bigger. The vision was this. What if you took that same simplicity and applied it to everything? Not just yearbooks, every piece of design that every business, teacher, student, and individual ever needed to create presentations. Social media posts, posters, flyers, marketing materials. All of it. One platform free to use, simple enough that your grandmother could figure it out in 10 minutes. They called it Canva. In 2011, Melanie and Cliff started pitching. Investor number 1 said no. Too risky, investor number 10 said no. The market is too competitive. Investor number 50 said no. Adobe is too dominant to challenge. Investor number 100 said no. Here's what that actually looks like in practice. 100 rejections isn't 100 emails. It's 3 years of your life. It's flying from Perth, one of the most isolated cities on Earth, to San Francisco, sitting in offices across from people who are half listening, checking their phones, deciding in the first 2 minutes that you're not worth their time. It's going back to your hotel room and rewriting your pitch deck. Again, then flying home, then doing it again 6 months later. Melanie said later, rejection stings a lot. Being turned down frequently in our early phases really forced me to work harder and hone my approach. But there was something else happening with those rejections that mattered more than the sting. After each no, she started asking why. And slowly, a pattern emerged. She was walking into rooms with a technical solution. Here's how the product works. Here are the features, here's the market size, before she'd made anyone feel the problem. She was pitching a tool before she'd made investors angry about the software that made it necessary, so she changed the pitch. She stopped starting with Canva. She starting with the look on the student's face the moment they opened Photoshop for the first time. She made investors remember the last time they'd tried to make something look professional and wanted to throw their computer out the window. She made them feel the problem before she offered the solution. A lot of founders never figure that out. In 2011, a venture capitalist named Bill Tai visited Perth to judge a startup competition. He was one of Silicon Valley's most connected investors, had backed Zoom, Wish, a dozen others. Melanie and Cliff managed to get a dinner with him. They pitched Canva. Tai didn't invest. But he didn't walk away either. He invited Melanie to one of his events in San Francisco, a retreat that combines startup networking with, of all things, kitesurfing. Melanie did not know how to kitesurf. She learned, she flew to San Francisco, got in the water, fell off the board more times than she could count, and kept getting back on. And between sessions, she worked the room. If you get your foot in the door just a tiny bit, she said later, you have to wedge it all the way in. At one of those retreats, she met Lars Rasmussen, co-founder of Google Maps. He loved the vision. He agreed to become Canva's tech advisor. Melanie thought that meant introductions and warm emails. What it actually meant was a year of Lars rejecting every single engineer she brought him. She'd send resumes, LinkedIn profiles, bring candidates in person. Each time, no, not good enough. Which was incredibly frustrating, she said later, because I just wanted to get started. But Lars was holding out for exactly the right person. Eventually, they found him. Cameron Adams, former Google engineer based in Sydney. He joined as co-founder in 2012. The technical piece was finally in place, and now the fundraising started moving. In 2012, 3 years after the first rejection, Canva closed its first funding round, $3 million. Not a fortune, but enough. They launched in 2013. In their first year, 750,000 people signed up. Not because of advertising, because the product was exactly what Melanie had promised it would be. Designed so simple that anyone could do it in minutes, for free. Here's where things get weird. The tech industry has a term for companies worth over $1 billion. They call them unicorns, because they're supposed to be rare, exceptional, the kind of thing that happens once in a generation. Canva hit unicorn status in 6 years. By 2019, it was worth over $3 billion. By 2201, $40 billion. Sequoia Capital came in, Bessemer Venture Partners, Founders Fund. Bob Iger, former CEO of Disney, became an investor and said of Melanie, I think she's very capable of running a company that is much larger and more complex than the company she runs today. And unlike most startups at these valuations, Canva was actually making money, profitable on a free cash flow basis every single year since 2017. While other tech companies were burning billions to grow, Canva was doing something unusual, building a real business. The platform now hosts over 200 million users. Users have collectively created 13 billion designs. More than 100 designs are created on Canva every single second. That poster someone made to find their birth mother. That presentation that landed someone a job. That social media graphic for the small business that couldn't afford a designer. All of it created in a tool built by a 19-year-old in her mother's living room in Perth. In 2023, Canva announced it was coming for Microsoft, Google, and Adobe. The entire productivity software market. The final piece of the vision that had been sitting in the pitch deck since 2011, when 100 investors said it couldn't be done. Melanie Perkins is by most estimates worth somewhere between $5 and $8 billion. She is the wealthiest self-made woman in Australian history. She still journals every morning, she still talks to Canva users online, and she and Cliff have pledged the majority of their wealth to charitable causes. They said no to the woman who watched her students struggle with software so complicated it took an entire semester just to find the buttons. They said no to the woman who learned to kitesurf in the Pacific Ocean because that was the price of entry to the rooms where decisions got made. They said no to the idea that design should belong to everyone, not just people who could afford expensive software and years of training. 100 investors were wrong. And somewhere right now, 200 million people are proving it, one design at a time.